Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Human SOS show. We're up to episode 70. Wow, been a while. We've been at this. That means what? We've got 69 hours of video out there for people that if they want to learn, good opportunity. So, welcome, everyone. Glad to have anyone from Facebook, LinkedIn, or YouTube. Hope that you will be sure and join us and be sure and engage with us because, hey, when you engage, it makes for a much better show. So, Anton, you want to open us up today?
Good morning, everybody. Human SOS, we talk about this not enough because we just, hey, Human SOS show, and we assume everybody's always watching us. But Human SOS is a system that Kevin and I developed with Prospective Force, really focused on mitigating stress within organizations and helping employees to thrive, but really going beyond your typical, mindfulness practices and just meditation and yoga, but really looking at systems and processes and all sides of operations, including the human operating system, and seeing how can we offload what we can offload when it comes down to stress, how we can adjust systems and processes, but also how can we create resilience within team members? How can we teach them how to sustain stress better? Because we understand that stress cannot be rid of. And actually, you don't want that. Kevin and I talk about this all the time, that getting rid of stress would just create a lot of apathy. And we don't perform well when there is no stress at all. We're designed to have a normal amount of stress, then recover, come back down, and do it again the next day, next week. But the environment has shifted. That's not how we're operating. So today we're going to talk about change management and how that kind of high level. We'll talk about the process in general, but also connect it to how that stresses people out, because that is a huge stressor on people. I've been part of companies where we call ourselves an iterative company, right? What is an iterative company? It means we're kind of throw stuff out there, see how things go, and then if it works, we're going to put more money and resources into it. And if it doesn't work, we're going to pull back. Well, you can imagine how much change that can bring on to the team members. And I've seen so many change efforts fail because there's the number one reason the change fails is poor user adoption, right? You can have amazing processes, you can have amazing systems, the greatest tech in the world. But if you have the concept of we've always done it this way within your team members, they're not going to be likely to do that. Or maybe some will and others won't, and it'll hold the team back. And eventually the company goes, you know what, we have to get back to the old way of doing it because we're just not operating well. And that user adoption creates failure, but ultimately many more changes have to happen, and that puts a tremendous stress on the team members. So today we're going to do as we always do. If you jump into the agenda, talk about our news article of the week first. And in this week's article, we're going to talk about burnout workers and time off. Just one of the SHRM articles out there that I like to read in the mornings. Then we'll talk about why change management is important. We'll show you guys the diagram that kind of explains this. The process we'll talk about is ACMP, but there's many different change management processes. There's ADCAR, there's probably 10 different ones. And I just like ACMP because they give you a nice little blueprint. You can go to their website, download it for free, because it's not a for-profit organization. It's a group of folks that got together and said, we need some standardization here to help people to operate better within change. So there is 6 or 5 steps within it. And the first one's going to be evaluating change impact on our organizational readiness. Then we're going to get into formulating the change management strategy. We'll talk about developing the change management plan, executing the plan, and then ultimately the one that people forget the most is complete the change management effort. Any shout outs, Kev, to anybody we got?
Yeah, we've got Ashfaq and Hawk. Glad to have them regulars. Ashfaq's from Pakistan. And Hawk, thanks. We're real pleased to have reached number 70. That's quite a number at this point. So thanks for being here with us. And be sure and throw questions, comments at us so that we can have good discussion on it.
Yeah, number 100 is going to be here before we know it.
I
But,
tell you,
we got to start planning it already because it sneaks up fast.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But, folks, I just want to ask you before we even dive into the article, just think about what kind of changes you experienced in your company, right? Did they end up coming out and they were great? Everything flowed smoothly because there was proper planning and execution? Or did these changes come out and they were kind of wonky, right? It felt like it was a lot of work. People were resistant. I'd love to hear, scenarios or any situations or any roadblocks that you may have experienced so we can kind of talk about them on the show. Kev, I watch your show, man. You do so much better with Wisdom Seeker Live than we do here getting feedback. So, we need the same level of engagement, hopefully here. But
Well, I hope that people will understand. I know that my live is Wisdom Seeker, but at the end of the day, what we're about is another form of wisdom, and it's in relation to stress and how to manage it. I hope people understand that part of the reason I'm involved is it fits my vision and my passion to help people reach their potential and to gain wisdom. So hopefully, folks will share their thoughts because got a lot of good folks to share things with us.
So the HR news article of the week, as I mentioned, burnout workers and time off. Do employment laws allow flexibility? And as you can see, there's the link down there. It's a much more in-depth article than necessarily we cover. But shout out to Christopher and Leslie for writing this great article. It doesn't mean whenever we share these articles, guys, doesn't mean we necessarily agree with everything, or it's just what I found that it relates to what we're talking about. Burnout is a really big deal, and it's gonna get so much worse. And it's not just because of coronavirus, right? This is a term that was coined actually well before coronavirus
Mm.
virus happened. And I think it's World Health Organization that finally made it like a scientific term and accepted it, I believe, like 3 to 5 years ago. But I'm going to talk about this article, but I'm also going to talk about we need to shift away from this main issue. Burnout is going to continue to happen until we get away from it. I'll mention it at the end. But they're just talking about during the pandemic lockdown, many employees did not take time off and PTO due to travel restrictions, right? So people were saving their PTO if they could. They didn't go anywhere because they couldn't. Some did that by choice, some didn't because they couldn't really go anywhere. And I've been hearing this, and I saw this in the article again. Media reports state that some companies, particularly in tech industry, have responded by scheduling week-long shutdowns to give employees time to rest and recuperate. What are your thoughts on that one in general, Kev?
I think it speaks to a broader problem that's out there that we talk about, and in fact, how we approach the whole concept of stress. By the way, welcome Noor from the UAE. Glad to have you. But I think the bigger problem is, and I even have been talking about this on Wisdom Seeker, is we've got our priorities out of whack. And this thing of work-life balance, and that work is this um, a major priority in our life. And I get it that we need to work, but it shouldn't be such a priority that it controls everything else. And I think that is the problem. And the idea that the only way that we can have downtime is to go somewhere or take a vacation, I think indicates again some other problems that we're not managing things well. And what I think people would do well to consider is take the time, but you can enjoy going to a local park, a state park, or if you happen to live in a rural area, just go out and walk in the woods and take those times. You don't have to be entertained or go somewhere different to be able to have that downtime. So I think it points to a bigger problem that, by the way, has, like you said, it's been there all along. I think this pandemic has just accentuated it.
Absolutely, great point. And this is more for like leaders and HR professionals, the next few points. But while this trend is laudable, employers may want to exercise care when implementing paid temporary shutdowns or holiday schedules, right? This is a change, right? You're going to implement that change.
Mm.
You need to think about what are the things that not right in front of your nose? What's going to happen in the long run? So if you hit the next slide, I got a few points on there that they're sharing, and they're talking about. Let's see here.
Let me share a comment from
Yeah,
Hawk.
go ahead.
He says, someone said you cannot burn out if you haven't been lit. I find some comfort in that. Thanks, Hawk. Yep, I agree. There are some out there that are still not moving. But what's sad is even in that state, unfortunately, some people still burn out.
Yeah, absolutely. So, they're talking about publishing a written policy relating, it's on the next slide, Kev. Publishing a written policy relating to company closures often helpful. It's one of those things that as HR professionals, you need to make sure that everything, your butt's covered, right? I don't say that HR is all about compliance. I've said this many times. We need to shift away from compliance to people potential department. That's what HR needs to be, but compliance has to maintain table stakes, right? It still has to be there to protect both the employee and the company and to really not upset people. So they need to know ahead of time if this is happening, what's going to happen in the big picture, right? So they've made suggestions of specifying which employees are eligible considering the rate of paid time off. If you're going to do that across the board, make sure you understand the financial ramification that's going to happen to your company. It's very nice, easy thing to say, but how is that PTO going to be paid out? Are you going to be paid out an hourly rate? They're talking about determining whether employees may use other forms of PTO during that time. So, can they take sick leave on top of that paid time off? Because some states mandate sick leave, right? So maybe they'll be able to double up. In some states, that would have to happen. Weighing any other eligibility issues, right? If there's any other issues that may come up, and then evaluating the impact on overtime obligation to non-exempt employees. All those things need to be considered. And the part that that I'm going to talk about heavily is other forms of time off. But like Kevin said, everything is talking about time off. And this is where I was saying we're missing the big picture. And I'm just going to play this out to you. Imagine this. Imagine you're going through a divorce, right? Imagine that your family at home situation is really, really bad. And you're giving this employee time off, and more importantly, even mandating that time off, having them spend more time at home than they were before. Do you think that employee is going to come back recharged and rested, or are they going to come back in a more different state and actually end up being more stressed out while you're thinking you're giving them rest? So the point that I'm making, work is no longer really the primary source of stress, guys. I'm telling you, I don't believe it is. Work is more controllable than life has become. There's so many different variables in our life that are causing stress on people, be it relationships, be it their personal health, be it their finances, so many different things. We do this at Prospective Force. We don't just talk about work stress. We talk about life, health, and work, and we have 4 pillars per each category that dives deep into different aspects of stress. And employers need to open up that perspective. They need to look at it and say, how can we custom tailor and recharge, not time off? We need to look at it as, are we able to give our people a recharge? Burnout, we got to give them a recharge, but that doesn't mean always time off. What are your thoughts on that, Kev?
Oh yeah, I see this, and the idea of shutting down to force people to take time off. Wow, I see all kinds of stress popping from that kind of choice. First of all, like you mentioned, communication. What are the implications? And then what people don't understand and leadership needs to consider. For some people, at times, what they when they go to work, it is actually a time of de-stressing for them. Like you said, if they're going through a tough time in life, uh, personally having been through a divorce, my work at times was my release. It was a way to get focused off of the terrible situation in life at that moment and focus on helping others by doing my work well. So wow, there's so many implications to this, and I'm not sure, just to be honest, that this is a good approach. I think it's it speaks more to management than leadership in my book. Let's take a one size shot at fixing everything one way for everybody, and most times it doesn't end up well.
And I hope as audience watches our show, you really understand how the world is creating this huge need for customization. We're customizing technology left and right, but we're not customizing the human approach. We have every ability to do that, but we have to first open up the scope and take what we think is possible and what is needed to make these customization happen. This is why we want to work with companies and really show you what stress looks like. It's not just this mental stress of having too much workload, but even in this situation, right? You're taking a week off. So I'll give you guys this example. I'm not going to talk about specific names and companies, but there's this company that is really popular, And it's because the CEO has raised payments, minimum wage, to astronomical levels, right? It's a really high payout. And we're talking about like minimum wage for this company is about 70K a year. Every employee in that company is making no less than 70K a year. Great. And on the surface, everything's great, everything's wonderful. And the CEO is getting tremendous reach online, and they're, people are like, oh my God, you're amazing. Until I go and I read Glassdoor reviews. And I went to Glassdoor to investigate the company, to dive in a little bit and see what is going on. What are people saying about this? And it's interesting. The CEO's, rating or whatever is less than Amazon. The company's rate the same level as Amazon, and Amazon gets so much, flack for overworking their people. So I started reading into the comments and seeing what's going on. They give unlimited PTO, they give these long weeks off, great pay, but the workload is so high, people can't take time off. They say if I do take time off, by the time I'm back to work, my work has piled up so much that now I'm going to be even more stressed out than I was before I left, trying to play catch up. And that's what I'm saying. We have to really consider when we do these policies, are we offloading the work? It's one thing to say unlimited PTO, that's wonderful. But if the person has such a high workload because they're paying so much that they're burning people out left and right, is that really the best thing overall when it comes down to health, when it comes down to life, when it comes down to complete picture of a human being versus just the work picture?
Well, and it's really indicative. People should understand our assessment starts with 12 statements that you're assessed on, but ultimately the full assessment involves 60 questions because the elements of stress are very deep and they're very broad. And if you don't consider them, then we are truly challenged to address the stress. And that's the first time I've heard of some of the Glassdoor comments about that company. I'm familiar with what the company you're talking about, how that they have been really touted in social media as being so wonderful. But yeah, there's implications. Somebody's got to pay that high salary somehow. And anyway, challenges there. And Hawk makes a comment, and this is a part of what we're discussing, that HR needs to remember as that transition, divorce, holiday, birth can be challenging, and adding one onto the other can make them into a mountain. And at the end of the day, we got to remember, I still think there's an irony. We call this human resources, but it could not be more dehumanized right now than any time in the past. I mean, it is truly not based on human observation and need.
Kev, I
And
gotta give a shout out here. If you see the language you don't understand there, that's Russian there.
oh, you know that? Oh, good.
Привет, братан. That's my home country, not my home city, but my aunt actually lives in Kiev. That's pretty cool. People from all over the world joining in. That's so cool. I love seeing that. But
Yeah,
yeah,
welcome.
your point. Oh, go ahead.
How would you pronounce the name again?
Yevgeny.
Okay, I'll trust you on that.
Genya could be short too. So I was surprised, right? I get online, and over the last, I don't know how long we've been doing this, about 3 years, HR has been a big focus of our conversation. We are geared towards helping human resource company because we have a human mission to really humanize and go much deeper than just talking about and actually create plans and actions. And what I keep saying, HR has to become an overall strategy of the company. HR is a nice thing to have right now. In most companies, it's there to protect the company. It's there to make sure that the company doesn't get sued, doesn't get doesn't get some sort of trouble, whether it be through EOC or it be through some other labor law or a lawsuit. But the thing is, it's still not focused on the human being as number one. And I'm not saying it's that way everywhere. There's many great companies that are starting to figure it out, but I thought the number was much higher. I thought that number was much bigger until I started to really dive into human resources, spend time in there, and realize that there's a lot of talk. There's a lot of conversations. There's a lot of, this nice things to say, but in action, especially when push comes to shove, that's when I
Yeah.
assess companies the most. I say it's not when things are great. It's when you're missing budgets. It's when, there's limited funding. Where are your priorities going? Where
Mhm.
is that money being invested into? Is it really going to the human beings like we're saying that it is? Or is it only just a little bit for human beings to make it look like we're doing something, but the majority of it is still going to system technology and everything else? And guys, don't get me wrong. I believe that those things are important and vital to company success. We believe in balance, right? We don't say company success is not important. We talk about this all the time, because if the company fails, all these people don't have jobs. We're just saying what should come first. We truly think that human beings should come first. And sometimes there's non-measurable, non-tangible items that you have to spend money on in order to get your performance to go up. And sometimes you won't be able to necessarily pinpoint it. Just like marketing, sometimes I was reading an article and people talk about marketing. And they're like, well, seems like this digital marketing is only giving us X amount of dollars. It's not a good investment. But they're not seeing in how many other ways it's connecting and helping these
Mhm.
companies to succeed. It's not seeing how the sales teams are succeeding because of it. Well, same thing with human resources. You can't always see the direct connection, but I promise you, if you invest in it the right way, for the right people through the right companies like us, right? A little plug in there, the benefits are going to be there in the long run.
Well, and I have to say that if companies lack wisdom in their approach, because what they don't see is they don't see that big picture. That leader's perspective is missing, that 30,000-foot view, because when you start seeing things there, you start seeing the results from different ways. Welcome, Alal. I hope I've pronounced your name correctly. And then Hawk makes a point, Anton. This is another twist on one that we're always talking about. Says, great point again. In 2010, I worked in CPS, and my boss was very proud of the massage chair you'd bought. None of us had time to use it. Okay, so now it's ping pong tables and massage chairs and yoga classes.
Yep. And me and Kevin joke about this, and we say this, but we're grateful for the effort. We are.
Yeah.
We're just saying that that was 10 years ago. Now we need leaders to step up and advance and realize that we need to custom tailor the approach. We need to, I talk about benefits all the time. And I was in a conversation where they were tailoring benefits to coronavirus and things like that, or, absenteeism due to people being sick. I'm like, but what percentage of your company is actually impacted by that? Have you assessed, or you're coming in as a leader and going, well, this sounds like a good idea. Let's just institute it, spend a bunch of money on it, and all of a sudden adoption is poor, or it's not effective because you didn't do the first part of assessing the need. And that's what
Mhm.
leaders have to really do a better job with. Ask your people, what do they need? But even beyond that, if they don't fully understand the problem, first educate them on it. We need a lot more stress management education to show people this is all the different sources of stress. It's not just your boss yelling in your ear. It's something like you thinking about your kids all the time and something that you're worried about. Maybe you need some flexible schedule, for example, because you're worried about getting to your kid to pick him up from school every single day. But is everybody like that? Maybe that person gets this while somebody else gets the massage chair because that's what they need the most and they have the time to use it. And I know that costs, people are going to say, well, the costs are going to be pretty high. I'm telling you, it's not a cost, it's an investment. It's 100% an investment.
Yeah, that is so key in that we in leadership in any organization need to understand spending or using our resources to improve or help our other resources, our people, is rarely an expense. It is done well more times than not an investment, and there is a huge difference when we consider that. We talk about, for example, training. Return on investment in training is conservatively 2.5 times whatever you invest. And so, investment in your greatest asset, your people, has to become a top priority. And I can get into workforce indicators and how it's even more critical the more younger generations in your workforce and all that. And if organizations don't get it, I'm concerned we're going to see them crash and burn, and it's going to be around employee problems, definitely.
There's gonna be, it's coming. It's already happening. I've already seen it, but there's gonna be a big change in the future where organizations will start considering the human operating system in general. I wish there was a tool that existed. I wish you could hook up a person to a monitor and say, this person is performing at X% of their capability, of their potential, right? If we could do that, we could easily quantify much greater returns on these investments that people make. It's impossible. Can't do that. But I promise you that your people right now are operating at a fraction of what their potential is. And your culture, many different things have to do with that. Your development, their stress management, all different components. And ultimately, we're going to talk about today is change management. So I wish we could do that, but we can't. So leaders have to think in the long term. To Kevin's point, 2.5 times return on your investment for training. If it's such a no-brainer, why aren't leaders doing it? Well, it's that thing of constant conversation. If I invest into them and they leave, what if I make them so good they don't need me anymore? Great. That's awesome, because they'll talk about your company with great praise and you'll get a lot more employees in the long run. Or they'll go test the grass on there, see if grass is greener on the other side, realize I was treated amazing. I was developed so much. I want to come back home. I want to come back to the place that made me feel that way. But leaders try to either hoard people or not invest into them because they're afraid of what's going to happen in the long run. That's not strategy, folks. They're thinking in 1 year terms. Strategy is not a 1 year thing. Strategy is a 3 to 5 year thing.
Mm.
So if your people are not part of that, you're operating at a fraction of your company potential. That's the bottom line.
Yeah, it is really remarkable. I think it's Richard Branson that says, what if people worry about investing in people leaving? He says, well, what if you don't invest and they stay? And to me, that is so simple yet very profound question that our companies, organizations really need to be asking that question.
So, why use change management? That's what we're talking about. And can't we just implement change? Can't we just come up with a great plan, do some project management, and get it to a point where everything's great? Sure. But what happens then is you get the orange line below, right? You see that there's a few key points here to point out on this graph. You have your current state, how things are right now. Then you have your transition state of while the change is being implemented. And then you have the future state is once the change is adopted. Now, if you just do project management and you have great plans, great execution, some don't even have that. Look at the orange graph. When do you get to a point of benefit realization from that change? Maybe never. Or that is so far in a distance that you've wasted so much time and resources on that and stressed your people out for no reason. You put a tremendous amount of load. Change requires a lot of stress. People have to adapt significant amounts. Our body doesn't like change. We do 95% of our tasks autonomously, right? You don't think about driving to work often. It just kind of happens. You don't think about breathing. But the same thing, there's many tasks at work that you execute that don't require a whole lot of brain computing, a whole lot of power. But when you institute change, the brain has to go through a bunch of processes to adjust. Well, think about that as taxing your system, taxing the human operating system. And if the return is never or very long from now, why even go through it, right? So when you're looking at the 3 important investments in change management, they improve the predictable business performance and productivity post-change implementation. They shorten the disruption period to change adoption, and they deliver organizational benefits quicker, right? So you have your reactive change, which is still going to be better than unmanaged change, and that's going to be the yellow line. That's how most companies do change these days. They see a problem happen. We have to react. Everything's usually done faster than it should be. There is not a lot of change adoption still. And eventually it may happen, but it once again takes a really long time. And then in the green, you have your managed change, where people do what we're about to talk about and go through the 5 phases. And then they see that the adoption cycle is much quicker. And then you see this J-hook effect where in the bottom, everybody's going to lose performance. If you think that you're going to institute change and not lose some performance, that's naive, because people have to adjust. You're getting away from how we've always done things. And now we're all of a sudden skyrocketing and everything's just great after a certain amount of time, but it requires specific steps. What are your thoughts on this diagram, Kev?
Real quick, Anton Satish, glad to see you. He has been a regular with us before. And yeah, we realize that this is a big subject that's needed. And welcome, Rob. Glad to have you. Rob has actually been a guest on my Wisdom Seeker show. So Glad to have you with us. Be sure to throw in questions, comments along the way. And something that occurred to me, Anton, we talk about uh, that so often businesses treat employees like plug and play computers. And what you're describing is, in one case, is the plug and play approach. But as I think about it, because I'm a little bit of a computer nerd and understand that, before a piece of software ever goes out, they break down how it's going to interact not only with itself, but with other aspects of the computer. Yet we don't even go to that much effort with our people to assess and see how is this change going to impact them, not just in their employment, but as a person. And so, maybe they need to adjust to say, well, maybe we need to be more like plug and play. At least with plug and play computers, we figure out how things are going to interact and have effect before we implement it. So,
Well, you'll hear me say human operating system a lot, and that term is probably confusing to people. What do you mean human operating system? But I use that term specifically to your point, Kev. Tech has got it right in many, many ways, and the tech industry in general. And that's why it's been booming since, the 2000s, and it's going to continue to do so. Why? Because of implementation cycles. They understand the concepts that you're talking about. What is it, SDLC or something like that? The acronym of how they go about, implementing different things. Our buddy Chris, would be much,
Chris
much better.
Morgan, yeah.
But the point is, they understand the end user experience, right? Everything they design, the good ones at least, they understand how is this going to be used by people and how is it going to work for them? Because I can design a great process, a great piece of tech, but if the end user experience is poor, it's not going to be adopted. It's not going to be utilized. But now take that from just software and programming and think about our brain, think about our body, think about this whole human operating system. How is the change going to impact that? And is it going to slow down performance? Are there going to be bottlenecks somewhere? Because that's the reality. This is the most important operating system you have within your organization, the human operating system, and all the different components that that go into it. And you have to get it right, because if you don't get it right, you're going to waste so much money, but you're never going to know why. You're never going to see the true reason behind it because you're forgetting the most important operating system there is.
And that includes, and key element is, unlike computers, they're not homogeneous in function. We are each unique, and that is a consideration that we have to give. Welcome, Panda from India. Glad to have you. And Hawk had made a comment earlier that I think is a high level concept that we've got to think about, is that if we help our people shine at their brightest, it'll create win-win. And that's what we're talking about, considering our people. How do we help them shine as part of our shared vision as a company organization? And let's see, Panda makes a couple of comments, says that change mindset is needed to accept change management. That is so true. We have to go into change understanding some people embrace change naturally. Other people resist it with everything in their being. And then there's the ones in the middle. And if we don't understand our people enough to know where they're at on that spectrum, again, we're not going to be successful in managing the change, or at least not be in the green line in effectiveness that's on the chart here.
And both comments are awesome. With who was it that said? I think Hawk said about the brightening people. Hawk, isn't that ultimately the leader's job, is just to make your people shine? Create an environment, the space and the culture and the development and all those other components to unleash their potential, to allow them to thrive and be their best selves, not putting them into these little boxes. Kev talks a lot about boxes and things like that. And that's such a great point. And to Panda's point, go ahead and hit the next slide, because that brings up the first step within change management, right? You talk about change mindset, evaluate change impact and organizational readiness for change. Right? Just because you came up with a great idea and you got this great piece of software, a human capital management system, whatever it may be, doesn't mean that right now is the best time to institute that change. If your team doesn't have that change mindset in place before you institute that change, that's the first thing you got to build. That's the first thing you got to accomplish. You got to get them ready and believing that that's a necessary thing. Because if you get that resistance right out the gate, that change management plan is most likely going to fail, no matter how good that change management plan is.
Yes, Satish makes a comment that fits right here well. If you're accepting that change is part of life, you'll get used to changing your tactics and even modifying your strategy. The first step that gets overlooked is that there are people that, again, have high level of resistance to change. And an effective leader's got to, first of all, know who those people are. And then, second of all, help them even at the most basic level to consider change is happening. We have no choice, but how can we make that change better and more effective, even for those people that are most resistant to change to start with?
And so many people just skip the step. So many companies jump into moving forward without assessing things in the back. Panda said failures allow us to accept the change which is needed to success. Looking back at that, right? We have to look back and see historically what has happened. Have we already recently created a ton of change and now we got to give people time to adapt and get used to it a little bit to get to a little bit of that autopilot before we add more to their plate? Perhaps we have to evaluate some of those failures and make people feel that it's okay that they failed, or you have created a culture of so much change that has failed that now it's actually too much a failure. Because now people are going, why bother? Why bother learning this new system? Why bother learning this new methodology, this new way of doing things, if next week we're just going to change that again, right? Leaders that have these, we're going to have our 3 key focus points, but every quarter it's a 3 new key focus points. I'm like, that's too much. You should pick 3 key focus points for the year that are so big and so thought about that your people can focus on those 3 for a year or longer, and then see how things went, see how things adapted, and then make more additional changes.
Well, and Anton, that goes to one of the core concepts that we apply, and that is the 10% concept. Okay. And this is true whether it's individual or whether it's organizational, that this idea of making massive change and especially doing it multiple times in a short period is healthy. That's like going on 3 or 4 different crash diets in a year. It destroys us physically, certainly, but also mentally, emotionally, spiritually by doing that. It puts us in such a bad state, and yet some organizations think, oh, well, we're going to change because change is good, and we should change because change is good. It doesn't matter if it's needed, and then it's massive steps, and it is beyond a reasonable human being's response to adjust to it. Even your early adopters, folks that are good for change, I don't mind change. I adjust to change pretty well. But there are moments I want to say, whoa, stop the bus, slow it down. We got to get some things settled down here first. Then we can consider, okay, another step, another change or whatever. And that's going to be true of anybody on the spectrum.
Viewers, feel free to comment if you love drinking from a fire hose. I have not met a single person who loves drinking from a fire hose too much at once, right? And this is tying back into the human operating system. Behavior science tells us how much change a human being can sustain. Behavior science tells us the right approaches, right? And there's statistics behind it. They vary by a few percent here and there, but statistically speaking, if you make one change at a time, the success rate is somewhere around 80%, higher than 80%. If you make 2 changes at once, success rate drops to 35%. If you're making 3 changes or more at once, you're looking at 5 to 10% success rate. That's not a good thing if you're thinking about how much investment often goes into change management, into creating new processes, new systems, and things like that. So that 10%, Kev, that just brought up is such a great point, Because if you do the right 10% by evaluating
Mm,
change impact,
mhm.
organizational change readiness, you're going to get 90% of the result from that 10%. But if you do 90% change, you may end up only getting 10% result. But the problem is there's lack of understanding. So companies see progress and they're going, great, we spent a millions, billions, whatever dollars on this, and we saw improvement. In comparison to what? Right? That's what I'm always going to come back and say. Just because you saw a marginal improvement doesn't mean you got a great return. If you got 10% compared to 90 and you spent actually more because you created so many different focus points, you didn't succeed. You just improved marginally.
Yeah, Hawk makes a great comment, says that there's a fine line between never change a winning formula and stagnation. Without a doubt. Yes, you've already
I'm
read that.
laughing at his other comment.
Okay, I got to put this out. Yeah, Hawk loved you. Got me laughing on that one. My dog loves drinking from a hose. Anton seldom works well. Yes, it's at least entertaining though, right, Hawk? Um, and then Satish makes a comment, says flexible attitude of leadership and ability to influence the team. A key word, Satish, you're so right. Get off of managing people by directing them to all do something one way, and lead people by influencing them into accepting change and be able to adapt to it in unique terms. You're so right there, and uh, and Panda makes an interesting comment on a much larger scale: is every civilization started with a new change? Indeed, every country that starts or restarts, it's been because of major change, and hopefully they change for the better. And that's the goal in any of managing change, is to make an improvement. What I think, Anton's fair to say, we're concerned that a lot of change that goes on is not an improvement. And in fact, at a minimum, it becomes a highly added level of stress to what's already maxed out anyway.
Yeah, and then she says change to learn, right? And the point that we made with the first slide when we showed that diagram, change is inevitable. Change is coming whether you like it or not. But will that change give you positive benefit realization at all, or when that actually happens? That's what change management is about. We're trying to shorten that cycle. No matter what, there'll be a performance dip, but we want to get to as fast as possible to where people are doing better, performing better, and following the steps that we're talking about, or this example, there's many others, like I mentioned, is a good one. So go ahead and hit the next one.
Well,
Now
and
evaluating.
Anton,
Yep, go ahead.
a basic thing, and goes back to Hawk's comment about the fine line, never change a winning formula, and stagnation. One of the assessments that we as leadership need to really make is, do we need to be involved in this particular change at all? And just because change is occurring doesn't mean it's required that we participate. But if it's occurring in a big way, we need to consider it at least, and then consider how we respond to it. Going back to if we respond to this change with this change, it's going to really be wrong timing for our people, or it's the wrong way for our people. Those are your leadership considerations. Go back to managers. Oh, I see a change and we got to keep up with change. So we're going to change this way at this time. That's not leadership. That's managing people, and it is bad approach in human operating systems. Without a doubt, it is a bad approach.
Yep. And then the next one is formulate the change management strategy. This is something that it's funny. I took a strategy class part of my MBA, and I loved our strategy professor because like most people that consider doing strategy are not even touching strategy. They're just working in tactics. They're working in plans. They never
Mhm.
get high enough. As Kevin said, leaders need to be in 30,000 foot view. They get to 10,000 and they think they see everything they need to see without realizing that there's so much more that has to be addressed, so much more that has to be planned for. So before you get to the next step, you really need to formulate a strategy. Take a look at what are some of these issues from a grand level. Take a look at what some of the issues. Prepare what's going to come down the road when we implement this change. One of the biggest examples that people talk about with change management, teaching it, is an example with Costco. Back in 2012, I think it happened. Don't quote me on the year, but Costco migrated from using Amex to Visa. Big project, millions of people involved in this. And on the first day when they launched it, it was an absolute disaster. Most of these cards weren't working. People couldn't check out. People couldn't do anything. And what I thought about all the time is the frontline employee, the cashier, that has nothing to do with any of it. And they're just trying to do their job, but they're getting blasted by customers that are expecting something to happen. They're expecting their new card that got in the mail to go through, and it just doesn't happen. Think about the amount of stress that put on them. Why? Because they didn't plan out a good change management strategy. They probably had great project management strategy, but the implementation of the change and adoption of that change wasn't considered properly, and it was an absolute disaster.
We got a visit from YouTube. Welcome to Hut Studio. We talk about vision. In my estimation, before any organization makes a change, they need to go back to their vision and say, first of all, does it fit our vision? Because at a basic level, the vision that we share with our employees is the moral contract that we have with them. And if we do things that go against the vision that we share, right there, we have already started with a problem. And that when we get to that level, we start seeing things more wisely. I know I sound like a broken record because I'm really concerned that we gain wisdom, but organizationally, we've got to have that wisdom. And if we do not, we're going to misstep and we're going to hurt ourselves and our people. And it has, yikes, it is just, the implications are scary. Hawk makes another comment. He says, in my world, which has been centered around mental health, this is oh so true. Unfortunately, much of what we have been doing doesn't work. Amen.
Mental health. I'm happy you mentioned mental health because poor change management destroys mental health. Yes. There's so many things that I can talk about so many different cases, but think about an employee that's working really, really hard as part of this change management thing. They're doing everything right. They're changing everything right, but the results never come. The company has screwed up with poor strategy. It was never an employee. But then the employee starts taking it on their own shoulders and feeling like I'm a failure. I can't get anything right. It's not their job to see that big 30,000 foot view. Maybe they're only supposed to see the 10. But if you as a leader, especially high level leader, didn't do a good job with that 30,000 foot view, they're going to feel like failures. And we talk about mental health in a very reactive way. We should be talking about it, giving people time off or, feeling sad and things like that. And I'm grateful for that. I am, guys. But it's time to advance. It's time to get proactive with mental health. It's time to get to a point where we do things and make it part of strategy to say, how do we avoid people feeling like a certain way that impacts their, mind and body and spirit? So spot on, Hawk.
Yeah, in fact, Panda's comment fits with what you're saying. Every organizational culture must have employees' feedback regarding new changes and how much they're comfortable. Leadership 101 right there, Panda. Yes, if we're not communicating with our employees, not masses, individually, and getting that feedback, we are going to make wrong choices in managing change without a doubt. And so thank you for that. Anton, I was just looking at this graphic, and I have to say, being an old construction guy, it's more telling of a graphic than what people, I think, grasp. Strategy being shown here with cranes. When a crane's involved with on a construction site like this, two things. One, is there has been a lot of underground work that's gone on, concrete buried, pipes buried, all kind of things. Plus, what we see above the ground at that point is just starting. If the crane is there, we're just now beginning to see the above ground efforts. So having this strategy is not goals. And I think quite often we confuse strategy and goals. Strategy is about, from our vision, from our mission and our values, how are we going to approach this change? What does that look like? And then if we start there and then start getting feedback, then we have a chance of figuring out what maybe the 10% we need to approach.
No, I love it, Kevin. And leaders have to have the time to do this. They have to have the time to plan this out. And leaders, unfortunately, for so many reasons, inability to delegate, not trusting your team, whatever it may be, not being able to hire quality people, many different reasons. They don't have enough time to spend in strategy. And strategy requires deep thought. As Kevin said, deep is underground, right? You have to go much deeper than the surface. You really have to spend some time on this. And I forget who it was, maybe Warren Buffett, that talks about how majority of his calendar is not blocked up, right? He has a lot of empty space in order to think about these things, in order to think about strategy. That's high level executives' number one job. And unfortunately, they're so bogged down with the minutia of daily operations that strategy is usually not effective because they simply don't spend enough time. So what they do, they create a lot of plans, and that's the next step. Hit the next slide,
And by the way, if you're needing some help in the area of leadership, we at Prospective Force are prepared to help you with that too. It's one of the pillars of our assessment. So consider reaching out if your leader and you're operating under the tyranny of the urgent, you need some leadership training, just as a thought there.
And just sometimes another perspective too, right? That's what we
Yeah.
can bring to companies, is not necessarily tell you what to do all the time, but help you create insights that are already within you. We focus a lot on coaching, and coaching is not about coming in and saying, here's plan one, plan two, plan three. That's consulting, which we can do in stress management and
Yeah.
other places, but we prefer coaching because we
Yes.
work with a lot of high performers, people that already know a lot of stuff, but you're so clogged up in your brain that you can't see some of these insights that are right in front of you. And that's what we love to create. So developing the change management plan. This is usually where most change management starts, unfortunately. It hasn't been
Mm.
evaluated. The company readiness hasn't been assessed. People haven't thought about grand strategy, haven't connected to the vision of the company. And they're just like, okay, we want to make this different. Let's build a plan. Well, that's probably the most simplest thing in my opinion. I think it's pretty easy to say, okay, here's all the components of, here's all the parts, and here's all the different things we got to impact. Now let's go with it. So I'm not even going to spend a whole lot of time on this piece because I think that this pretty common to happen. Would you agree, Kev?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. The one downside that I see is that uh, the uh, plans that we create, we get so locked in that we become inflexible, and so we just need to make sure that in our planning that we understand that the plan is the starting place. It's not the ending place. Generally speaking, the military, we come up with our initial plan and then we're immediately reconning to see how's it going and what are we going to have to change because we know it's going to change.
And then once again, the next piece, if you hit the next slide, that's the one that's also most common, is executing the plan. Now, I wouldn't say it's done as well as just building the plan because a lot of times people create a lot of plans, but pieces don't work out because the previous components weren't there. Plans end up being wonky. People abandon them or components of them. Their move disjointed because it's not proper sequencing and timing. But in some shape or form, execution obviously usually happens. People are like, hey, we've spent millions of dollars on this change management. We got to execute. To your point of Kevin, that execution is inflexible. That execution is like, okay, we said this is going to happen. There's no communication with the team. There's no consideration and reevaluation of end user, of the human operating system, and how much stress this has created, right? If you're seeing as we're implementing change, all of a sudden my team is super stressed out. Are they going to be learning really well at that point? maybe I need to extend some of the cycles that I've created and make these plans longer, because it's not just about execution of the plan. What did we say? The end user adoption is the most important part. So just because you ran through all the components and the benefits at the end are not realized, that's not a good thing. We may need to back off a little bit, a lot bit, depends on what the situation is, so the end user can feel like they can actually adopt it.
Well, and maybe, we talk about 10%, and there's value in having the 100% plan, but the 10% comes in execution. Okay, we've got this plan and it involves 5-10 years down the road. Get that. That is good strategic thinking. I appreciate that. But when we go to execute, you don't execute the entire plan necessarily. You pick the critical 10% and you work with that. And when you execute the 10%, and if it seems to be going in the right direction generally, then you consider, okay, do we bring in the next 10% or whatever later? But executing poorly is another key. And if we just throw everything out there and execute, we have once again demonstrated that we're not considering the human operating system. We're back to treating people like robots or machinery, and it just will fail. I can guarantee you. The most effective, and this is why I have real challenges or concerns with people getting overly programmatic, is that historically with most of these programs that people adopt and adopt them or adapt themselves to, rather than it being adapted to the person, the success rate is generally at the highest about 30%. And some of them are not even that good. So 70% of your folks are being left out and even hurt, and their stress level is just magnified if we execute poorly.
And this is where people usually stop, right? They don't get to this piece. They don't go to complete the change management effort because they don't even think about what that means. Completing the change management effort is not just running through your plan, right? How many times have you seen everybody be taught the right thing, went through all the proper training, but they're just not using it? They don't feel comfortable with it, or there's lack of support. So this is where really the creative change managers come in, and they figure out who are going to be the sponsors of making this change sustainable. How are we going to keep it going? What continual education do we need to do? What reward system need to be in place, right? What kind of incentives have to be provided? And most importantly, what kind of communication must we receive back from our people to understand that they're actually using it, they're feeling comfortable with it? Because the reality is people don't like feeling stupid. So if we didn't do the change management plan appropriately, and they start feeling like I'm not comfortable with this, and they don't have the proper support down the road, it's going to go away. They're going to revert back to old behaviors. They're going to revert back to legacy systems, whatever it is that the change you're trying to institute. And if you were trying to go and be like, okay, on day 2 or day 52 or 102, we're going to go cold turkey and we're going to switch from old to new without a good transition period, you're going to end up with a situation like Costco that I talked about, where they had the payment system, nightmare.
Well, and when we're down to this level, when we're talking about specific tasks, this is where a good leader knows their folks' strengths, and they're tasking people based on their strengths. They're not just making this task to everybody regardless, because then those that are not strong in that task, we have set them for failure. We've added stress, and it creates challenges in the team, because then you've got your so-called winners and losers. So when you get to the level of tasking during change, make sure you're tasking based on what you know about your people's strengths, because if you task to their strength, you're setting them up for success and not failure.
Well said. Well, folks, that's all we got for today. As always, this has been great. I'm really grateful for the engagement. I think that we keep getting each week more and more of your comments, and it makes the show much more enjoyable for everybody. Me and Kevin can talk all day, but it's not that fun. It's much better when we're hearing comments from you. And like I said, I keep trying to get it to where we're as engaging as Kevin's show is. If you guys haven't seen it, check it out. You know, what is it, 8 a.m. Eastern on Mondays that he does it.
Yeah.
Wake up around 6, catch a beginning of it on the way to a client meeting. So definitely check it out. But if you need help, right, and with change management, with just performance management, stress management, but ultimately your human capital management, right? The human operating system, the human beings in between your four walls, and you want them to do better, feel better, perform better, whatever is the thing that you're after, whatever improvement that you want, reach out to us. Let us show you how the HumanSOS system we've developed can help your organization to thrive. And for now, if you just want to take a test, go to perspectiveforce.com, take our assessment. It's individualized, so it'll pinpoint to you which of 12 areas are causing you the most stress. Is it work? Is it life? Is it health? And what subcomponents within them are the biggest problem?
Yeah, start there, okay? It's free. The only risk you have, there's two risks, okay? One is some time, and I know your time is precious, but we believe from our hearts that it will be worth your time. Second is you're going to share an email with us, and we only sell the emails to the highest quality marketers. No, I'm just teasing. Please don't. I can see it now. Somebody just got off and goes, "Oh no, we do not sell your information, and we respect your contact." So thank you, everyone. Really appreciate you being here. Be back next week, please. And if you're getting a lot out of this, and we appreciate the engagement, invite others. There is no special need. I try to invite those that have participated in the past, but feel free to invite anyone you think would benefit from this conversation, and especially in the concept of managing stress, because we've all got stress, and what we got to do is figure out how to manage it effectively, and that's what we do at Prospective Force, and we do it well. So thanks, everyone. Have an amazing rest of your week, and look forward to hopefully seeing you back next week. God bless. Take care. Stay safe.